Just snap your fingers and I'm walking like a dog hanging on your lead. I'm in a spin, you know, shaking on a string, you know. You make me feel like dancing. I'm gonna dance my night away. You make me feel like dancing. Gonna dance my night away. Candace, hi babe. I feel like dancing, dancing, dance the night away. I feel like dancing, dancing. Sorry, I love this song. So, give me a minute. No, 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 no. Just hold me tight and turn on the light. 'Cause I don't wanna go home. Put a spell on me, right where you want me to be. You make me feel like dancing. I'm gonna dance the night away. Hey Google, stop. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Auntie Andrea's Reading Corner. I am your delightful host, Andrea Pandrea. I'm back. Hey Candace, nice to see you, honey. Welcome and congratulations on being the first. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. Anyway, I'm so glad that you're going to join me tonight. Hey, Bill, nice to see you. Happy Valentine's. Mwah. I hope you've all had a lovely day with your families and your significant others. I went and saw my dad today, as usual, and we had a lovely visit. I took him some nice flowers. He had no idea it was Valentine's Day. And even 10 minutes later, he's like, what are they for? I was like, they're for you. Anyway, we had a lovely lunch and we had a nice little visit. So my dad's my Valentine this year. I think I just saw Martha there, Martha Cooper down in the AZ. Good to see you, my dear. Nice to see you again. It's been a while. I think the last time I did a video was end of November. I think I did say too before that I was going to take December off. Then I got excited and happy on that last one because I always feel so energized at the end of one of these, and I just can't imagine not doing them. But then, as I suspected, I knew December. I love December, but it's a busy month, and for me, I don't know. I just find like I enjoy it. I sound like somebody who hates holidays. That's not true. I love holidays. I've always loved holidays. But I think I just wanted the space to relax and enjoy it, you know, on my own. And I'm really glad I did because I had a lovely holiday. Got to see my family, and I hope you all had a good time as well. New Year's, my good friend Drew came over. He's a tenant in my building, so he is part of my bubble. And we had a really fun time. Then the day of January went by really quick. I don't know how your experience was. I don't remember. I was thinking about it today. I'm like, I literally don't remember any of January. Like, not a fucking day. Not one. It's like I woke up New Year's Day with a hangover, and then I was collecting rents on February 1st. So I don't know how that happened. Very odd time. It seems like, as I was laughing, Daphne Urban, who we all know and love, I marvel because she's that person, other than my friend Bill Anderson, who is always reminding us of celebrity birthdays on Facebook. So this one day, she posts, Chris Christopherson is retiring. I was like, he's still alive? Like, and I meant it. I wasn't trying to be funny. I really had no idea this guy was still walking the earth. And so we had a little funny kind of back and forth. I was like, God, that's so odd. Like, you see some of these celebrity birthdays, I'm like, they're around, or they'll be like, oh, happy 40th. And I'm like, they're only 40? You know, it feels like they should be 70. Because then minutes later, I saw her post about Gene Hackman. Like, happy 92nd, Gene. And I'm like, Gene's in his 90s? Like, what the fuck? It's like, I feel like we're living in a parallel dimension where time is bending and nothing makes sense. So anyway, I think that's just aging, which we all are. But you know, whatever. I don't mind. I'll gladly take the senility along with the immense confidence that comes with age and wisdom. Anyway, I think I'm just going to get right on with it. I don't think there's anything else I wanted to catch up on. No, we just celebrated, what, the 1 year anniversary of COVID, what, the first Canadian case of COVID. I think, you know what, by and large, I think we're doing pretty good. A lot of the people I know are still, you know, we've got into our routines, and I think that that's really our best friend right now, routine, and just sticking with it and surrounding ourselves with supportive people. And I think that's just the best we can do. So stay the course. Hopefully one day they'll be able to lift the restrictions again. And then, I don't know, we're just going to see how she goes. In the meantime, we've got each other. And so that's where I want to say happy Valentine's Day to all of you. I wanted to do this little, hey Cameron, good to see you, honey. Welcome back. I wanted to do this today because I knew I wanted to get back on track with the readings. And I thought, what better day than Valentine's Day for me to express my love and appreciation for all of you for supporting me. And you have been so amazing. Like, okay, I got this. This is really one of the things that really inspired me. So the other day, Melina was in town working. She's like, and she had told me she was coming by, but I'm just like I'm always busy with work. And like I said, I'm in my routine. So I work, I go home, feed my cat, feed myself, sit and watch my show, go to bed, get up, do it the next day, like that. And then Saturday, wake up, watch some TV, get dressed, go to dad's, feed him, come back, do some showings, eat, feed cat, go to bed, do it again the next day. I'm quite happy with my routine. But anyway, the point is, she had told me a few weeks back that she was going to be in Van, and she's like, hey, can I see you on the Wednesday? I'm like, hey, hi. And I said, yeah, sure. Well, anyway, I totally forgot that she was going to be here. So she's like, hey, I'm out front of your building. I was like, I'm just leaving for an appointment. I'm like, shit. She's like, well, I have something to drop off for you. Can I just drop this off? I'm like, sure. So I run down. And she brings me this beautiful care package, which is my cover photo of delicious candies and chocolates and things. And this beautiful card. And, you know, Valentine's aren't just for kids or just for people in love. They're also for the special people we love, like you. Happy Valentine's Day. Love, Miko and Melina. The red and gold theme was Miko's idea. Apparently that was quite challenging for Belle to pull together. You did an amazing job. The same day, I checked my mail, and I'll tell you, this one brought a tear because Christina Witt is this lovely, beautiful person I went to high school with, who I haven't seen since grad. I got this lovely Valentine's Day card from Christina because, well, she says, happy Valentine's Day. I want you to know that your humor and love you spread online livens up my day. Your smile is infectious. Love, Christina. And I was just like, ooh. Like, really, for someone to go to such trouble to find my address and send me this beautiful, beautiful card, like, I was just so touched. And I said, you know what? You've inspired me. I'm going to start my readings again. So here we are. And I'm really, really glad that you're joining me. So, Sam. Hi, Sam. Hi, Ben. Good to see you guys. So I decided, I thought about doing an erotic tale, but I really couldn't figure out a way to do it. And not, I don't know. Once it's out there, kids can share it. And I just thought maybe that wasn't such a hot idea. I don't want to get banned, that's for sure. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to go back to my good old Stuart McLean Vinyl Cafe Diaries, and found a really great story, David Morley's story. And the reason I think it's fitting is for Valentine's Day, it's relatable for anybody who's been married for an extended period of time or with a significant other for an extended period of time. And I just it made me chuckle, and I thought you all would enjoy it as well. It's funny, my voice has been so good because I quit smoking, so I'm really proud of myself. I stopped. I don't like to use the word quit because you never know. I might have a trip and fall moment. But for now, I have quit, and I don't plan on going back to it. And my voice has been so clear, but I'm so tired from a couple of days of just running like a dog. However, cheers. I want to congratulate myself for that, because I had quit for 10 years, and then I started about 8 years ago after my divorce and everything, and I was all stressed, and I made Sandra give me one. And I said, I can have one puff. Well, turns out that wasn't the case. Thank you, Candace. I'm very proud of myself. Hey, Steve. Steve Tomlin's here. Merry Valentine's Day, hun. I've had one before this. So anyway, cheers to everybody. Happy Valentine's. And to anyone else who's trying to overcome addictions or whatever, things that are holding you back in general, all the best. Stay the course. This is actually a really good time to focus on stuff like that, putting yourself first, okay? All right. Here we go. So once again, Stuart McLean, Vinyl Cafe Diaries. This tale is called Dave and the Duck. I feel like I'm right in your face. I'm going to back up a little bit. I've got something behind me. Any second, I'm just going to come bailing off this chair. Okay. Dave and the Duck. Thank you for joining me. One idle morning, when Dave was sitting behind the counter in his record store, fiddling unconsciously with his wedding ring, he realized, first with mild interest, and then with growing alarm, that he couldn't get his ring off his finger. Not that he wanted to get it off, until, that is, he noticed he couldn't remove it. Then he wanted to very, very much. He tugged and twisted the ring until his finger turned red and puffy. Then he put his finger in his mouth and tried to pull the ring off with his teeth, but it wouldn't slide over his knuckle. And that was the moment when Dave, sitting alone in his store with his finger in his mouth, entered the world of irrational fear. One moment he was listening to a Lee Hazelwood album, circa 1973, trying to decide if Hazelwood was making a deep cosmic statement or perpetrating some kind of elaborate musical joke. The next, he was tugging at his finger like a wolverine caught in a trap, struggling to catch his breath. In the blink of an eye, his store felt airless, as if all the oxygen had been used up, as if there was no air left to breathe. In the blink of an eye, Dave was overcome by a need to move, as if the only way to get air into his lungs was by moving. And still, the ring wouldn't budge. He locked up and flipped a sign into the window that read, "Be right back," hurried down the street, twisting the ring as he went. He didn't have a clue where he was heading. He was too overwhelmed by this sense of the world collapsing upon him, too overwhelmed by the need to get going, to pay any attention to where it was he was going to. He called Morley from a payphone. "I can't get my wedding ring off," he said. Morley was sitting in her office at the theater she manages, going over a budget for a season $35,000 in deficit and heading south. Not that I want to," added Dave into silence. "Or need to or anything," said Dave. The knowledge that he was talking to his wife was calming him down. "It's uncomfortable," he said later that night as they sat in the kitchen after supper. "It's like an itch you can't scratch." Morley took his hand in hers, and Dave felt the panic returning, looming like a swamp monster over some swamp horizon that he had thought was far away, but turned out to be right there in his own kitchen. "Kev, hi, babe. Good to see you." It was getting hard for him to breathe again. It was like he was in a hole at the bottom of the swamp, and the ring was on his finger, and his finger was on his hand, and his hand was being held, and he was starting to feel as if he should get moving again. And if he was going to move, he would need his hand back. Most of all, he needed to get the ring off his finger, or he was going to go crazy. "You're not the shape that you used to be," Morley was saying. "There's been growth. It happens." He removed his hand from hers and held it in front of his face as if examining his fingers. In truth, he was getting his hand out of her grip. "You can always have it sized," said Morley. "They could make it bigger." "Shirley, good to see you, babe. Thanks for joining us." "They can make it bigger." He went to the jeweler before he went to work the next morning. "It's a nice ring," said the jeweler. "We had it made," said Dave. "It's one of a kind." First, they tried lubricating Dave's finger with soap, then with olive oil. When neither of those worked, the jeweler got a roll of electrical tape and taped Dave's finger like a hockey stick. Everything except the ring. "Can't be too careful," he said. Then he took Dave to the back of the store and pointed to a grinding stone. You have to be careful, said the jeweler, as the stone began to twirl. One wrong move and I could take your whole finger right off. When he was finished, the jeweler said, You can have it back in a week. That night, Dave showed Morley the indentation on his finger where the ring had been. It was like a phantom ring. Fuck, it feels good to have it off, he said to Morley. They'd been married 23 years. Morley's eyes narrowed, but only imperceptibly. I've had that ring on my hand almost as long as I haven't, Dave said. It felt like it was squeezing me. Oh, said Morley. Oh, was all she said. By lunchtime the next day, things had shifted. The missing ring had begun to worry him. It's weird, he said. I keep feeling for it, and it isn't there. I do it all the time without thinking. I feel naked, emotionally naked. Interesting, said Morley. Then it shifted again. It started to bother Dave that it bothered him. He said, I'm so set in my ways that all it takes is a stupid ring to throw me off kilter. I'm fat and I am almost 50, and every morning I have orange juice and cereal for breakfast at more or less the same time and more or less the same place, and I take the same 3 sandwiches to lunch every day, and look, he said, pulling his sweater up over his stomach. Every time I wear this sweater, I wear this shirt. Morley didn't say anything. By the end of the week, Dave wasn't talking about the ring anymore. He knew enough to keep quiet about it. He noticed that every time he brought up the ring, Morley would get prickly, would talk only in monosyllables. Mel, hello, welcome. Shelley, hi. Kev, Shelley, I got a whole bunch of you here. That's wonderful, great. Thanks for joining me. Would it bother you, she asked on the weekend, if I took my ring off? Would you be upset if I stopped wearing my ring? I'm just getting it sized, said Dave. I haven't taken it off. I haven't stopped wearing it. Dave got the ring back a few days later. A few days before he flew to Nova Scotia. His sister Annie had called and said Elizabeth had a stroke. His father's sister is Elizabeth. Annie said, I have to go to Boston for a week. I think you should come. He went the following Monday. Morley drove him to the airport. I don't know when I'll be back, he said. It depends on what I find. He had everything packed in a satchel that had once been his grandfather's. Elizabeth, who was always handing him stuff, had given the satchel to him. It was the sort of satchel you don't see anymore. Leather. Lumpy, but soft, nice to the touch, and stylish for its unstylishness. As Dave reached in the back seat for the bag, Morley noticed the ring back on his finger and smiled. I love you, she said. Look after Elizabeth. I get teary-eyed. He checked into the Lord Nelson Hotel. I know that hotel. This whole segment really kind of touched me because of course I lived there. Yeah, so this is all kind of very, very nice for me. He checked into the Lord Nelson Hotel and went right away to the hospital. Elizabeth was confused. At first, she recognized him, but then she had no idea who he was. The doctor said, It's early, don't worry. She's going to be okay. He had dinner by himself in an Italian restaurant on Spring Garden Road. He had 2 glasses of Merlot and pasta with roasted vegetables and a cup of dark coffee. It had been 2 years since he had been in Halifax. It was a bittersweet feeling to be in Halifax alone. Good Lord, why am I so emotional? Anyway. The next morning, coming down in the elevator, Dave realized he had left his key in his room. He would get one at the front desk later. It was early. He went for a walk and bought a book at one of the bookstores near the hotel. Then he wandered into the public gardens. Inside the gates, there were tulips of every color. Chinese red, lemon yellow, coral pink, lilac purple. I should take flowers to the hospital, he thought. He sat on a bench for a while near the bandstand. Then he bought a bag of peanuts in a plastic bag and In a preoccupied, not paying attention sort of way, he began to feed them to a duck that was hanging around his bench. Before long, Dave had a cluster of ducks squabbling for peanuts. Hi, Ryan. Thanks for joining us. It made him happy just to be sitting there, feeding ducks. He was trying to be fair about it. He was trying to spread the peanuts around so all the ducks had a chance, not only the aggressive ones. There was a tentative duck on the edge of the circle. Dave reached deep into his bag of peanuts and threw some to the diffident duck. The others turned and waddled furiously towards it. In the midst of the commotion, Dave caught a flash of metal in the sunlight among the peanuts on the ground. And he thought, oh, some poor sod's lost a ring. And then he felt for his own ring. To his horror, he felt only finger. He realized he was the poor sod, and it was his ring, glistening in the sun. He looked again, and then it dawned on him with a sickening clarity that the hungry, left-out duck had just gobbled up his ring. Dave stared at the duck in disbelief. The duck stared back at him. Dave looked at the bare finger, and a wave of dread settled on him. It was the same feeling he first had sitting in his store. The ring, which belonged on his finger, his wedding ring, which he had just had sized so it would be easier to get on and off, was in the stomach of a hungry quacker. His heart began to race. He was short of breath. He was dizzy. He felt faint. The world was collapsing once again. Dave dropped his bag of peanuts and lunged at the duck. The duck squawked in outrage and fluttered up about 5 feet in the air. It landed in the middle of a group of ducks on the other side of the path. Dave knew that if he looked away for even an instant, he wouldn't be able to tell his duck from the other ducks. With his eyes locked on the culprit, he made another wild and unsuccessful leap. The duck fluttered up again, and Dave slid along the grass on his knees. He was like a football player chasing a bouncing football around an end zone. The duck stood up on its legs and began to flap its wings. It looked as if it was going to take off, and in desperation, Dave pulled off his jacket and flung it into the air. For an instant, it hung there like a shadow. Then it enveloped the bird. There was a moment of confusion and feathers and squawks, and then Dave was standing in the park with a duck wrapped in his jacket. A duck tucked under his arm like a loaf of bread. He looked around to see if anyone had noticed. There was a woman holding the hand of a small boy staring at him. "What you going to do with that duck?" she said. Dave had no idea what he was going to do with the duck. "Roast it," he said as he passed her. The only thing he did know was he was getting out of the park as quickly as he could. He was heading towards his hotel. Where else would he go? Sorry. The duck was surprisingly quiet as they crossed South Park Road, surprisingly well behaved. The duck seemed relatively happy under the coat. Dave was almost at the elevators when he remembered he didn't have his room key. He lined up at the front desk, thinking that this wasn't the first time he had stood in front of a hotel clerk with a bird under his arm. The clerk looked down to check his name on the hotel computer. Dave tried to rearrange the duck. The duck quacked. The clerk looked up abruptly. Dave said, "I beg your pardon, excuse me." Sorry, guys. "I beg your pardon, excuse me." He squeezed the duck against his body as he walked across the lobby. Apparently, he squeezed too hard. Halfway to the elevators, the duck had a dump. People sometimes use the expression "as loose as a goose." Not, however, people who know about these things. People who know about these things know that goose pellets come out pretty well packed. A duck dump, on the other hand, comes out as loose as a goose. Once the elevator doors closed behind them and Dave and his duck had a moment of privacy, Dave opened his jacket to see what was going on, which is something he wouldn't do if he had it all over to do over. It was a mistake. An understandable mistake, but a mistake nevertheless. As soon as the duck spotted the elevator lights, it began to beat its wings furiously. In an instant, the quiet duck had become a wriggling mass of kicking and squawking feathers. It had become a scratching and biting duck. When the elevator door opened on the 4th floor, Dave was barely holding on to the duck by its little duck feet when it beat him mercilessly with its wings. The elderly couple waiting for the elevator didn't say a word. Not to Dave and not to each other. They didn't step forward into the elevator, nor did they step back. They simply stood motionless and speechless and staring as the feathers flew and the doors opened and then closed. 2 floors later, when the elevator doors opened again, the duck gave Dave a mighty whack with a wing. Dave loosened his grip for an instant and the duck was free, flying down the corridor with Dave in pursuit. An art dealer from Toronto, a coiffed woman of a certain age, opened the door of her room just as the duck winged past at about shoulder height and 90 miles an hour. She was still standing in her door with her mouth hanging open when Dave screeched to a halt and fixed her with an air of steel authority. "Hotel security," he barked. "Get back in your room and lock the door." For good measure, he added, "The duck is rabid." Sorry, guys. "The duck is rabid." The woman stepped backwards and slammed her door without a word. Dave peeled off. He rounded the corner at the end of the hall and had already taken 3 steps before he stopped and gasped and spun in the air and headed back the way he came. The tables had turned. The duck was coming towards him now with fire in its eyes. Dave lurched back down the corridor, bouncing off a fire extinguisher, glancing over his shoulder, looking for an open door, thinking as he heard the beat of the wings that this was closer than he ever wanted to get to the running of the bulls in Pamplona, Spain. It took 12 minutes of utter madness before he got the duck under his arm and into his room. And then the duck bit him, and the chase was on again. Around and around the bedroom, Dave after the duck after Dave, the two of them with enough adrenaline coursing through their bodies to fuel a British soccer riot. When Dave finally got the duck into the bathroom, and the bathroom door was shut with Dave safely on the other side, feathers and duck muck were everywhere. It took Dave almost an hour to clean up. He carefully checked each duck defilement for his ring. Then he collapsed into the wing-back chair in the corner of his bedroom and stared at his empty finger. So I'm just checking to see if anybody's joined. He looked at the closed bathroom door. It was eerily quiet in there. He got up, cracked the door to see what was going on. The duck had pushed one of the hotel towels up against the edge of the tub and fashioned a sort of nest. It seemed content as Dave slipped through the door. "It's nice in here, isn't it?" said Dave. "Quack," said the duck. He checked each duck dropping in the bathroom, but there was no ring there either. He filled the tub with water and, having once again shut the duck in the bathroom, lay on the bed, wondering what he should do next. Before he had developed a plan of action, there was a knock on his door. The young man standing in the corridor was wearing a blue blazer and holding a notebook and a walkie-talkie. "Hotel security," said the young man. "Yes," said Dave. "We have a report," said the young man, "of a loose parrot." Dave stood back and waved his arms around the room. "Loose parrot," he said. "Not in here." When Dave checked in on the duck again, it seemed so comfortably settled in his nest that he felt brave enough to leave the bathroom door open. Half an hour later, the duck would waddled out and walked around the room, pecking at the carpet. Dave got some corn chips from the minibar and left them in a pile near the television. "Hey, Raj. Good to see you. Hi, Chad. Good to see you." He called Morley. "I have to tell you something," he said urgently. "It's about the wedding ring." "You've lost it," Morley said. "I haven't lost it," said Dave. "I don't think I could go through a missing ring again," said Morley. And that is when the duck started quacking furiously. "What is that?" said Morley. "The television," said Dave. "It sounds like you're watching some nature thing," said Morley. "I am," he said. I'm watching a duck lay an egg. You never watch that stuff, said Morley. This is unbelievable, he said, Dave, genuinely startled. You sound like you've been drinking, said Morley. What's going on? Nothing, said Dave. I have to go. After the phone call, Dave fell onto his bed and tried to sort out his thoughts. He was exhausted. Why hadn't he been able to tell Morley what had happened? Where were these feelings of fear coming from? He looked at the duck. He could feel a wave of panic building again. Morley would be furious if she knew where the ring was. This isn't about us, he told the duck. It's about my wife. The duck quacked and had a dump. Dave dropped to his knees and peered at the refuse. No ring. If I feel like this, he said, imagine what my wife would feel like. I'm doing this for her. He put the duck back in the bathroom and a do not disturb sign on the door. He went to the hospital. When he came back at dinner time, there was duck slop everywhere, but still no ring. Dave opened the bathroom door and phoned room service and ordered himself a beer and a half-dozen oysters on the shell. When the duck saw the oysters, she ran across the room and sat at his feet. So he ordered another dozen for her, and they watched the early news together. After the news, he went through the latest mound of duck dirt. Her production was beyond belief. At this rate, he figured, the time from bill to butt couldn't be more than 24 hours. He ordered another dozen oysters, and they watched The Simpsons. Dave had seen the episode before, but the duck seemed to enjoy it. Just a minute. He was woken at 5 the next morning by loud squawks. He headed for the bathroom door, but stopped when he realized the cries were coming from the other side of the room, from the window. He threw back the curtains and, to his horror, found a male duck pacing back and forth on the window ledge. He opened the bathroom door. There was a second egg in the makeshift nest, but his duck was paddling in the bathtub. You have a visitor, said Dave. She rushed to the window, and the ducks pecked at the glass like prisoners. His duck looked accusingly at him, but Dave didn't open the window. A few hours later, Dave stepped outside to get a taxi. The doorman, who was holding the cab door open, suddenly screamed and dropped to the ground. Dave looked up just as the duck husband executed a tight dive-bobbing maneuver past their heads. Holy cow, said the doorman, brushing himself off. That was just like in a movie. Dave looked up and saw the duck wheeling over the public gardens like a fighter plane. He jumped into the taxi and went to see Elizabeth. While he was at the hospital, Dave was seized by a spasm of anxiety. It was only a matter of time, he thought, before someone at the hotel found him out. He looked up motels in the hospital room phone book. He chose the cheapest-looking ad on the page. At supper time, instead of heading back to the Lord Nelson... That's Delilah, she just took a dump. At supper time, instead of heading back to the Lord Nelson, he took a taxi to the cheap motel. It looked even more run down than the ad in the phone book had suggested. There was a grill in the front office, like in an old Western bank. How much for the rooms? Said Dave. The manager was wearing an undershirt. Hourly rate? He asked. A young woman with a short skirt walked in the front door and sat down in the broken lobby chair. She was chewing gum. She eyed Dave. The manager nodded at the girl. Is Melanie with you? He asked. Dave shook his head. Do you allow animals? He asked. The manager's eyes narrowed. What kind of animals are you talking about? My pet, said Dave. The manager didn't say a word. My pet duck, said Dave. A duck? Said the manager. Dave nodded. The manager spat into the wastebasket and said, We're not that kind of place, mister. On the way back to the motel, Dave went to a drugstore and picked up a pair of rubber gloves and a box of X-Lax. But when he got back to his room, he found a little pile of corn chip droppings in the bathroom. Aaron, good to see you, babe. The duck was already passing the things that he'd given her the night before. Dave dropped the X-Lax in the garbage. After supper, he went to the library and learned that everything a duck ingests goes to its crop before it goes to its stomach. The crop, a muscular processing plant, is full of little stones that grind food up before it's digested. According to the book he found, Dave's ring would be ground to gold dust before he would ever see it. Or, more likely, it would stay in the crop until the duck died. Dave could, he supposed, cut the duck open, but he thought, remembering the words of the odious little motel manager, he wasn't that kind of guy. He went back to his room and wrapped the duck back up in his foul jacket. Then he took her across the street to the public gardens, and he let her go. When he put her down, she flapped her wings a few times and then waddled away without a backward glance. "Good luck," said Dave. She didn't seem to want it. As he watched her slip into the brush, Dave wondered where his ring would end up, and who would find it, and how long from now. What would they think? What story they would make up when they found the ring in a circle of duck bones. He knew his duck wouldn't touch the eggs that she had laid, now that they were no longer in her nest, and so he threw them into a dumpster behind the hotel, along with 2 large bags of paper towels and duck deposits. He didn't sleep well, wondering what he would tell Morley about the ring, worrying about what she would say. Early the next morning, Dave took his jacket to the front desk. He asked the concierge if he could have it cleaned. The concierge stared at the foul jacket, and his lip began to curl. "It's clam chowder," said Dave. "Of course," said the concierge, flicking a feather off the counter with disdain. "Christina! Welcome, good to see you. I opened up by thanking you for your beautiful card, so you're gonna have to watch back on your own time. But it's really good to see you." Where was I? Of course, said the concierge, flicking a feather off the counter with disdain. Dave visited Elizabeth again. She was less befuddled each day. The doctor told him that she would have to go to rehab for at least a few months. Dave told Elizabeth he had to go back home. "I'll be back in a month," he said. At lunch, he went to a jewelry shop not far from the hotel and, with a heavy heart, bought an extravagant silver bracelet for Morley. He had never bought her jewelry in his life. The store, the clerk, and the enormous quantity of jewelry overwhelmed him. He almost fled without buying anything. But the clerk was fussing with him so attentively that Dave didn't want to disappoint him. The bracelet cost a small fortune, but if he was going home bare-handed, he couldn't go empty-handed. He thought it was a pretty bracelet, but he wasn't sure. Morley would have to tell him. He went back to the hospital to see Elizabeth one last time, but she was asleep, and he didn't wake her. He had 2 hours before his plane. He went to the hotel to pick up his jacket, but when he got there, he couldn't find his ticket stub. He looked at the concierge hopelessly. "It's all right," said the concierge with a smirk. "I remember you. You're clam chowder." He handed Dave the jacket on a hanger and passed him a small envelope. "The cleaners found a ring in your pocket," he said. "Imagine you would want to wear it home." Dave had time to take the hotel bus to the airport. As they pulled by the public gardens, he put the ring back on his finger and stared at it. 23 years was a long time. He didn't have any regrets. He had a window seat on the plane and was served a surprisingly good meal. He knocked back 2 glasses of wine with supper and a drink later. He flew the final hour with his face pressed to the glass, watching the sun setting ahead of him and holding the silver bracelet in his hands, thinking that nothing happened without a reason. He was still holding the bracelet as the wheels bit into the runway. It made him anxious to hold it, but it was a new kind of anxiety. It felt fresh and exciting. He had never done anything like this before, and it made him happy. The end. I love that. I wanted to share that one because it just reminded me so much of the silly things that you get in your head after 23 years of marriage. 11 for me. He just couldn't handle not being able to get that damn ring off his finger. But then, you know what? well, all the nonsense that ensues. But that's life. That's marriage. That's funny. It just cracks me up. And so I hope you really enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed reading it and sharing it with you. I will wrap it up there because I think it's 7:50. Yeah, I've been talking long enough. But I'm really, really glad to see you all. Thank you for joining me, as always. I will probably start up a regular read. I'm thinking I'm going to do once a week instead of twice a week. I think, especially through the winter, I'm just more tired. Like, I'm just honestly ready to put my head down and go to sleep right now. Emily, you jumped in on the end. Love you, babe. Good to see you. Happy Valentine's Day. Like I say, yeah, I'm probably going to do once a week instead of twice through the rest of winter. And then come spring, summer, I'll probably be a lot more fired up with the longer days and better weather and things. So why don't I'll just, if you're interested in following along, just stay tuned. What's today? Sunday. I probably won't do Sundays. I'll let you know next week what my regular night's going to be. And I really hope you'll join me. By the way, I'm probably going to be starting up with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I think it is. It was suggested to me through Corey Edwards, a good friend of mine, that him and his kids might enjoy hearing me read those books. I've never read those ones. I know most people have, but I haven't. Plus, my cousin Michelle has them. She got them for free. So I said, well, maybe that's a good next choice. So if you have any suggestions, however, feel free to send them to me, message me, or whatever. And I'm certainly happy to read anything. As long as it's going to be lighthearted, give us all a little bit of a laugh, let us get away and escape reality for half an hour to an hour once a week. That's kind of my goal. So with that, I will let you all go. Happy Valentine's Day. I hope that you all had a wonderful day with your families and you'll have a wonderful evening tonight. Tomorrow is family day. Really take advantage of that time. I'll be spending it with my cat, having an actual day off, which I haven't had for quite some time. So whatever you're doing, make sure you enjoy it. Thank you. Happy Valentine's. Thanks, Candace. Thanks for joining. Crystal. Hi, Crystal. Thanks for joining in the end there, babes. I'm just wrapping it up now, but you can certainly always, I always post it. You can watch it from the beginning anytime you like. I also post it on my YouTube channel. You can find me there at Andrea Pandrea. Okay? Good night, my dears. I love you. Take care of yourselves and each other.